All right, hello everyone, and welcome to Sean's Old School Movie Podcast, Episode 2. I'm Mike, and with me is the man himself, as always, Sean Whiteman.
Hi.
And today I think we're going to talk about action movies and, their role in mainstream society and
Impact that action movies have.
They're quotable. I mean, kids play as action stars, so we've all seen the movies. So, without further ado, welcome to episode 2.
I admire your luck, Mr.
Bond. James Bond.
Oh, don't hit that.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Just a cook.
I'll be back.
Wax on, wax off.
You've just been erased.
Hey,
Yo, Adrian! Adrian!
I am your father. Get to the chopper!
All right, so action movies. So, Sean, when I say action movie, what comes to your mind?
Oh, what comes to my mind when you say action movies is definitely cheesy one-liners. Definitely cheesy one-liners after you've killed somebody. Bullets whizzing all over the place, pure ass kicking, pure foul language, but trying to incorporate a story around all of that. And like one that I definitely mentioned too, one that I've definitely been on a kick for quite a little while, because I watched it the other day, because I haven't watched it for a long time. Face Off. So let's take a look at John Travolta and Nicolas Cage. I hate Nicolas Cage, which I think I've stated that before. But this is probably like the most tolerable thing I'll watch Nicolas Cage in, if I want to call this movie tolerable, because I never realized how ridiculous it was. So for the 2 hours and 20 fucking minutes this film lasts for, okay, we have a fantastic concept. Nicolas Cage as terrorist, he's hidden a bomb in Los Angeles, FBI agent Travolta has to swap faces with this guy. Yeah, they literally remove each other's faces and swap faces in the coolest of fashion. So Travolta has now become Cage. Long story short, finds the bomb, it's all cool, but Cage is woken up out of his coma and now he becomes Travolta. Okay, so now we have a little bit of a problem. Now going back a little bit, at the start of the film, spoiler alert, Cage tries to kill Travolta, and in do so kills his 5-year-old kid. Totally tragic, totally friggin' heartbreaking. So, this is where the film has massive problems. Massive problems. Because there has got to be about 7 scenes, in again, the 2 hours and 20 minutes that this lasts for, that the two of them are standing face to face with one another, with guns pointed at one another. What the fuck more, motivation do you need to put a bullet in this guy's skull? But no, you stand there talking, and then this draws out for overlong, ridiculous gunfights, which mean nothing in the film. You could have ended all this shit within half a fucking hour and blown the guy's brains out all over the wall.
But therein is where it lies. You would have ended the film in a half an hour, and then no one would have.
But that's the problem with the story. You've incorporated scenes.
But it's the same sort of thing where, the hero fights his way through all of the what do you call them, associates and everything, to get to the villain, and then all of a sudden both of them are like fucking sparkly black belt kung fu master wizards. You know what I mean? Like just once, don't you want to see the hero get to like the end and just beat the shit out of the villain?
Absolutely.
Like, just slaughter him, because, I mean...
But that's why I love old school, like, 80s and 90s action movies. So if we go back to guys like Schwarzenegger, Van Damme, most definitely. Seagal, top of the list. We couldn't just kill the guy. No! We had to have some epic hand-to-hand, super ultra mega kung fu battle where the bad guy can take more than extravagant amount copious of pain, okay, which anybody would have been dead a coon's age ago. So we can see the guy get completely busted up. And in that concept of talking about people getting busted up, like, how come nothing hurts the hero? So when you watch an action movie, like, how come the hero can take such absolute large quantities of pain, and the small amounts of pain that he extracts on the main antagonist at the end is nothing compared to what this guy's taking, but hey, kills the main bad guy. But our hero has been through hell and high water, is busted up left, right, and center, been shot, been punched, been kicked, been beaten up.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how they even have the energy to finish what they start by the end of it, right?
Yeah,
like
I'm sorry, man, but
and I know you're not a Nicolas Cage fan because but
no, but
Con Air, that was a good,
totally awesome. But okay, but that had meaning behind it. We at least have a small setting, which is just an aircraft, and this guy who's a former Army Ranger, so he's obviously trained in the concept of combat. Okay, he doesn't really take a whole lot of beatdown through the movie. And he gets shot at the end and shit like that and what have you, but
a lot of it, I think, is suspense too, like him trying to figure out what he's going to do.
Sure, and there's lots of tension, like, do these guys know who I am? Like, what's going to happen if these guys do find out who I am?
Steve Buscemi scene where he finds that doll and he's singing or whatever is one of the creepiest things I've ever seen.
That is, like, extremely creepy, and then thrown in there for good creepy concept too. Absolutely.
Okay, well, what about when Nicolas Cage teams up with the original James Bond, and they have to escape from Alcatraz?
Oh, The Rock! I totally forgot about that. And so, what better could you have but James Bond? Which I'm going to go on a huge Bond rant sooner or later. I just forewarned for you people out there. But yeah, I mean, Nicky Cage, who was upcoming action star at the time, like Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade, what better than to pair him with James Bond? And Connery was, for his age, was awesome in that film. That was my only reason for watching
Connery's
The Rock.
one of those ones where, I mean, even now, like, what was that movie he was in, Entrapment?
Yeah, with Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Yeah, like, I mean, he was getting up there in years then, and he was still...
Yeah, he was slick. He was pretty sly.
Still doing his James Bond thing.
Absolutely. Which unfortunately typecasts him, but that's another one. Typecasting when it comes to action movies. Certain guys that are typecast, Schwarzenegger, Stallone, Bruce Willis, definitely. All Bruce Willis ever is a cop. I mean, there's maybe 2 films out there where he's not a cop.
But he's basically, he's
a cop. And he's always stuck in, like, hip-deep in shit situations, yada, yada, yada.
Okay, but, I mean, Schwarzenegger, he tried to do other things. I mean, he did Twins, and what was the one where he was having the baby?
Oh, Junior.
Yeah.
Junior, which is terrible.
I mean, I know. He tried, though. He tried to get away from his
but when it boils
typecast,
down to it, I'm sorry, man, you're an ass kicker.
But he's the Terminator.
He's a Terminator. Exactly.
Just like
he's
Sean
the Terminator.
Sean Connery is James Bond.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
You can make him other things, but he's always going to be James Bond.
Bruce Willis, I can't remember the name, but he's the Die Hard guy.
Die Hard guy.
Like,
precisely.
You know what I mean? Like,
and you know what the unbelievable thing about Bruce Willis is? Die Hard guy, and this guy got recruited for Die Hard from moonlighting. He was in a soap opera. And he get extracted out from a soap opera, and now you are ultra mega one-man army ass-kicking cop.
Why am I forgetting his name?
In the movie?
Yeah.
John McClane.
Thank you. Sorry, it was driving me crazy.
Like, okay. Now, since we're on the subject of Die Hard, the original Die Hard.
One of my favorite Christmas films.
Don't exclude that, people. That does rate as one of the top 25 most popular Christmas films.
And it is a Christmas movie.
It is. It is totally. A Christmas
I've had many
movie.
arguments with my father about this, but it is.
It is
to me,
a
it's
Christmas movie. Only because it takes place on Christmas, and the general story is he comes down to LA to spend Christmas with his family and gets caught hip deep in shit again.
It may as well start Santa Claus.
But he does dress somebody up as Santa Claus,
there you
kind
go.
of, and
Yeah,
writes,
exactly.
"Ho ho
Christmas-
ho!
Christmas
Now
time.
I have a machine gun," which is kind of funny. And on that note of the humor, Die Hard is a perfect action movie. It blends fantastic cat and mouse game with a witty script with an action-packed script. If you fall asleep during Die Hard, there is probably something wrong with you. Because Die Hard is totally jumpstart your heart. Great characters, great character introductions, and right off the bat, you were thrown into a giant shit zone.
Well, and you know what?
And-
I think one of the, and I'm not going to say about action movies, but about any movie of any genre. When people quote it, or when you can say one line from that movie and everybody knows what you're talking about, like that means something too. And
Absolutely.
and if anyone ever says "Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker," you know
exactly what it's coming
I
from.
mean, it's the same thing with Schwarzenegger with the "I'll be back" and "Get to the chopper," and my personal favorite, "It's not the Tuma."
It's not the Tuma, exactly.
But I mean, and we watched that video the other day of it was like 18 minutes of stupid, cheesy Arnold
Schwarzenegger quotes. I mean,
lines.
the guy has so freaking many.
But there's so many, like Bond, James Bond, shaken not stirred, like all of that kind
All
of
of those kinds of things.
like people who aren't even necessarily action movie fans know that's James Bond.
That's James Bond.
They know that "I'll be back's the Terminator," right?
We're kind of jumping back and forth, but this is another great subject because, first off, an action movie isn't an action movie unless you make a cheesy quote after you've killed somebody. You have to make some sort of witty pun after you've killed somebody.
Oh, well,
that's number one.
That's the most fun part about killing somebody.
Number two, this is always the interesting part about an action film, which most people probably might not pick up on. Actually, is when you take a look at the hero. He's the guy that's the loner. He's not going to get any praise. He's not going to get any thanks for anything that he's done because he's the hero. That's what heroes get. They get no praise. They get no thank you. And that's why, to me, when I watch an action movie, the hero doesn't stand out. The villain stands out. The villain is always the more interesting because of what his plans are to achieve what he's going to do and what he wants to do and how far is this guy going to go to stop the hero, and to see him get more and more frustrated the more and more the hero keeps coming in and so forth.
Well, and I think you've hit on something there too. Like, a hero is only as good as the villain he's against.
Exactly. If the villain sucks, the hero sucks.
Who's your favorite villain?
My favorite.
Let's say of any movie of this type, who's your favorite villain?
My favorite movie villain, I would have to say most definitely, I have to go with Hans Gruber from Die Hard. Alan Rickman, God rest his soul. So when we take a look at Hans Gruber in the movie, although he was this Armani suit wearing, skinny, funny looking German talking guy, this guy wasted no friggin' time because this guy had goals he had to achieve. So again, spoiler alert for nobody that's seen the movie. His first guy, he takes the CEO of this corporation, takes him into the room and asks him for the code for this safe. And the guy keeps saying, like, I don't know the code. And he just stands there and says, fine, then, you're not needed. Bam! Blows his brains out. There's no, oh, you're no good to me? Bam! Blow his brains out. You're no good. See ya. Didn't care. There was no talking. There was no beating around the bush. There was no wasting time, not like Face Off. And that's one thing I never understood. When these bad guys catch these good guys, Why the fuck do you waste your time? If this good guy is trying to stop your plans for world domination, what the fuck are you going through some elaborate scene to get rid of the guy? And why is there only one inept guard? You got the guy. Kill him.
Just
Shoot him.
Done. Head dead. Done.
It's over. So, for example, like I watched Goldfinger the other day, quintessential James Bond film, which there is absolutely everything. And I'm sure back in the time when this film was made in '64, this was kind of okay. Today we would kind of frown on it, but Goldfinger actually catches James Bond. And for some odd reason, he chains him down to this table and goes through this elaborate death scene of running this very slow-moving laser up the table, cutting it in half, as he talks to James Bond. Kill him! This guy's already interfered in your life before he even knew you were doing anything bad twice. He bottomed your girlfriend, okay, which you had to kill her. Then, he shows up for this golf game and he screws you over there too. Now the guy's into your plans for... Kill him! Why didn't you just kill him?
And it's funny too, because whereas not an action movie, this is a comedy, but Austin Powers obviously is a direct spoof of James Bond. And is it the first movie where Dr. Evil catches him?
And he's got him over the tank of the sharks.
With the sharks, and I don't think it was sharks. I think he wanted sharks, but he ended up with
sea bass
or something. And they didn't even have the freaking laser beams attached to their freaking heads.
No laser beams. They were ill-mannered and ill-tempered.
But Scott Evil, Seth Green, was basically, just kill him. I got a gun in my room. I'll go get it, and you can just kill him. Why are you telling him your plan? What if he escapes? He's going to stop you. Just kill him. And I thought that was great, because
absolutely
it is every action movie. You rarely see one where there isn't, the villain doesn't catch him, especially James Bond, catch him and tell him the elaborate plan, and then leave him in a
easily escapable situation
that he can escape from and leave, and you don't even stick around to watch him die. You think if this guy's your enemy,
right,
and the only thing stopping you from world domination, you'd want to stand there and watch him die. Obviously you don't have high morals. A little bit of blood shouldn't turn you off, right? And that's why, and I'll tell you who my favorite villain is. And I mean, this is a much more recent movie, but one of the best movies I've seen in a long time for an action movie was The Kingsman.
Loved fantastic.
Loved Samuel L. Jackson as the villain in that movie. He was not necessarily an evil, murderous guy. He was a smart man who firmly believed that the world was overpopulated, and the only way to basically save the planet was to kill the majority of the people on it.
Right.
So
absolutely.
What's his master plan? Free internet for everybody. And of course, who's not going to take that deal in today's world? So everyone joins the internet. He, turns on this little secret signal thing that makes everyone go crazy, and everyone starts murdering each other.
Great plan.
It was kind of elaborate, yes. But I mean,
these guys are crazy.
He was a villain. He was a villain, and he was crazy, but he was doing something he believed in that would actually save the world.
Right.
And he was keeping all the most important people alive, even against their will. The Princess of Norway or whatever, the Queen of Norway.
Right.
He wanted her to be part of the new world, even though she didn't want to go along with this plan.
She didn't want to lock her up. She didn't want to go along with the plan.
But he kept her alive. And I love when the agent comes out of the church after he slaughters everybody in there. And Samuel L. Jackson just said, he literally says, "Oh, this is the part where I'm supposed to tell you about my plan or whatever. This ain't that kind of movie," and just shoots him in the head.
And I love the reference to "this ain't that kind of movie," which is freaking hilarious. That is an awesome freaking line.
And that brings us to action movies and their effect on mainstream media, because here we are watching an action movie that's actually poking fun at all the other action movies, which in a weird way makes it more realistic. It's not set in its own world. It's set in our world because they're making fun of these action movies that we've all seen.
Now, that's really funny that you say that, because Bond movie I watched last night, I watched On Her Majesty's Secret Service. And at the very start, well, we don't get to see it until the end of the opening action scene, but different James Bond. Connery had left because he thought he was getting too old, and they brought in this Australian brought in this George Lazenby. And at the end of the opening action scene, he's got the girl's shoes who ran off, and he just stands there and he looks at the camera and says, "This never happened to the other fella." So we make reference that I'm a completely different James Bond, and Connery certainly would have gotten the chick, and so he makes reference that, oh, I guess I have like some big shoes to fill here because this never would have happened to the other guy. And
I always love it when movies, when they break that fourth wall.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like another movie, which, I mean, if we ever do a podcast about like superhero movies and stuff like that, this one will be way in there because I love it. But Deadpool was
fantastic,
perfect for breaking the fourth wall.
Fantastic, broke every rule
to the point where there's fan theories that Deadpool is actually like a Wade Wilson's coma dream. He knows he's dying, so he exists in a different reality. But that's another podcast. But it breaks the fourth wall, and I like that because it makes it seem a little more realistic, and it's basically telling the audience you're smart enough to figure this out. So, you know what I mean? But that's why I like The Kingsman, and that's why I like Samuel L. Jackson, because he wasn't this kung fu master. He never fought anybody in that movie because he was not. He didn't know martial arts. He was just a nerdy guy.
Just a nerdy guy
with a plan.
Two that I'm going to bring up because your concept of like not knowing martial arts or not knowing really anything like that or anything like that. Again, I'm going to have to make a Bond reference here. Skyfall. Now, not that most of the villains were hand-to-hand combat guys with James Bond or anything like that, but Skyfall was kind of like that. And the villain in that was a former MI6 agent, and he just had a chip on his shoulder against MI6. And his whole elaborate scheme was to prove that MI6 is full of shit. That they're just lying out there. And their whole concept is just nothing really but to use, people or agents at their disposal, and they don't care in the process, which is obviously what they did to this guy in the film. And he sets up like this huge elaborate scheme, and he's just a nerdy guy. He's a really creepy villain, but nerdy guy. Nothing special about him, just this huge, extremely elaborate scheme that he's created. And again, he's not a badass. He's not kick-ass or anything like that. He's not, fucking wild-eyed or anything like that. He's just a dorky guy. But he was a badass villain.
See, and I like ones like that. I like the villain to be a somewhat normal person who doesn't know martial arts. I mean, and I like it when the hero's kind of like that too. You know what I mean? Or like the movies that drive me crazy. I mean, I love the movie. Don't get me wrong. The Transporter.
Yeah,
love The Transporter.
They piss me.
But why is Jason Statham the greatest fighter in the history of planet Earth?
I know.
They make no reference to why or that he's been trained. Like at least with the Kingsman, they train the kid.
Yeah,
right.
Statham's just a
at least with Steven Seagal movies, he was always at least Steven Seagal. He was trained when he was in the military before he got busted down the ranks to being a cook on a ship or something.
Right.
But you knew there was training there was something, whatever.
Something. He's
Jason
military.
Statham's just I drive, but I'm also the greatest fighter.
I'm also the greatest fighter.
If I wasn't making so much money driving bank robbers around, I'd probably just go win all the
He's also
UFC
the worst
titles.
transporter ever. The guy's got all these fucking rules and breaks every single one of them. You'd be the last transporter I'd fucking hire.
That's a good point. That's a good point. There's been 3 transporter movies, I think? 4 transporter movies. Have we ever seen a successful transport?
No! Because the guy breaks his rules right off the bat.
But he can fight his way out of it.
Of course he can. So, on that note, okay, so other rules for action movies, how come bad guys have bad aim? How come bad guys can hit, characters that don't really mean dick all, But when it comes to the hero, the bad guy has a worst fucking name known to man. And how come, when it comes to killing the villain, the hero, although only holding a Beretta, which holds like 15 bullets in the mag, seems to have 73 shots in the fucking gun, because I never seen these guys change out magazines in their guns. They can seem to just repeatedly fucking shoot until I've at least hit the villain once.
It always made me wonder what would have happened in Star Wars if the Empire, instead of spending that money on plastic armor for the stormtroopers, had just given them lessons, given them target practice.
Man,
because I've never seen, like, even in like a war, and there's like 10,000 stormtroopers there, you could stand, like, the safest place to be is where they're aiming,
right?
Because they ain't gonna hit you,
right? Like, absolutely. Now, mind you, I mean, there are action movies out there where we do see, like, the bad guys to be just as good. Not as often as we think we should, when it's definitely like one of those like one-man army fucking movies or some kind of shit like that. Unless, of course, we're talking something like, again, an Under Siege, possibly Rambo. Even though Rambo being what it is, we get backstory to Rambo. He's Green Beret. He was #1 at enemy disposal and so forth. So we know this guy has stealth skills, can take you out, as easy as cake, and so forth. But there are just those other ones that, like, where the fuck this guy come from? I don't know dick all about this guy. Jet Li movies are like that sometimes. Statham movies, definitely, again, like you said, The Transporter being one of them.
You never really find much of a backstory to it.
No.
And that, like I said, and with The Transporter, that's what bothers me. Like, you look at the guy and you're like, okay, this guy must have some serious training from somewhere.
Yeah.
But,
we're gonna have to make a correction. We do find out in the first one he was former military as well.
But like what? Like secret ninja assassin?
No,
military?
actually, to be honest with you, I guess they train martial arts in the Air Force because he was an Air Force pilot.
Do they train martial arts in the Air Force?
I don't know, man. Unless you got to stand on the wing of your plane and kick some ass.
I'm just saying, he was a really good fighter. Like, I mean, like, at least with Rambo, we got more of a backstory, and we know why he's able to do the shit he does. Like, even with the Steven Seagal movies, you get a bit of a backstory, though I highly doubt they teach, like, 8th degree black belt martial arts to their cooks in the Navy.
No, but he was former Navy SEAL.
Exactly, right? So you get that backstory. You understand that he would have training.
Yes, I understand.
Whether it's believable to think that he would have that kind of martial arts training?
No.
At least you know that he has it.
Yes. Now, one that I would like to go back, Rambo. Now, Stallone is definitely well known for creating...
Who I hate.
Yeah.
By the way, like, as you hate Nicolas Cage, I hate Stallone like 8 times worse. I don't like it. I just the guy cannot speak. Every time I try to watch one of his movies, it's all the same thing. It's like, starring Sylvester Stallone, and then he walks in, and then there's explosions and gunfire and punching, and then a bit more of the. It drives me crazy, and I can't stand him. But aside from that, Rambo would have been great if he just didn't fucking talk.
Fair enough.
Anyway, sorry.
He is well known for creating 2 of Hollywood's biggest action stars. If you go up to anybody and say Rocky or Rambo, and you say, "Who the fuck is that?" I'm sorry, man. Go back to the rock you've been living under.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we take a look at Rambo, to some people, when you say it, may seem silly. Again, we think of Sylvester Stallone and we think, oh, well, it's just Rambo. Things that I noticed about Rambo, though, they deal with things that were going on in the world at that time. The concept is just, what would it be like if Rambo stepped in and took care of the situation? So when we take a look at First Blood, which was 1982, that was kind of around the time that the Vietnam vets were returning home from Vietnam and were not very well welcome back due to the concepts of the Vietnam War. And of course, we see Rambo treated as the villain in the film because, of course, he starts a big beef with the police because they want to arrest him, and he starts this war and yada, yada, yada. The second one dealt with American prisoners still being held in Vietnam and people not knowing about them because the Vietnamese kept the prisoners because America owed so much money in war refuge to the Vietnamese people and never paid. So the Vietnamese kept the prisoners. And so Rambo's got to go in and save these guys. The third one dealt with the Russians and the Cold War and the invasion of Pakistan.
Which, I mean, that was a huge thing in the 80s.
That was a huge thing. Russia was the superpower. And if we go back and take a look at...
Well, and I mean, you look at almost every action movie from the 80s.
Russians.
The villain. The Russians.
Russians.
The Russians are always the villains.
Bond did it. Rocky did it. Rambo did it. Just about everything did it.
And I mean, Rocky did it on a different level. And it wasn't because... It wasn't military or anything like that.
No.
It was just against the Russian guy
because
the Russians were the enemies. Like, if you recast Rocky today, like, say you were to make Rocky now, the very first one, he'd probably be fighting a Muslim.
Probably.
With the way the world is right now. Or...
What would get better ratings?
Or a Hispanic guy, I guess, if it's in the southern states.
Possibly. But...
in the southern U.S. anyway. But...
going back...
that was the war, right? It was the Americans against the Russians.
Right. And going back to things... sorry to have to... I got to go back and finish on my Stallone bill here. Whether you like Stallone or you dislike Stallone, which I dislike Stallone as well. He, is not a pleasant individual in real life. But you can't deny what he's done. He is stuck with the same formula of films for 40 plus years. He has won Academy Awards for it. He's proven that he can write with Rocky 1 and Rocky 2.
And you know what? And where he started from to where he got.
Exactly.
Is amazing. And
we take a look at something like Rambo 2. Silly movie. Silly concept, silly action film, one-man army against the entire Vietnamese army. Okay. But Rambo 2 has been rated as one of the top 25 most rock'em sock'em movies. That's number one. At the $12 million it cost to make at the time, brought in more than $300 million in 1985. And at the same time in 1985, did the fourth Rocky, which is still to this day considered one of the most popular and most financial sports movies to this day. Again, cost $10 million to make. That's another $300 million he made in the box office in 1985.
And the thing
that's awesome.
We were going to talk today too a little bit about action movies and their role in mainstream society, and Rocky's a good one for that because Rocky is the ultimate underdog story.
It's the ultimate underdog story.
It's that formula that essentially every Disney type movie follows.
Right, heart and perseverance gets you to where you need to be.
Yeah, if you believe in yourself and you work hard, you can achieve anything.
You can achieve anything.
It's the ultimate American dream movie, and that's what it is. It's
absolutely.
It's this guy who's basically useless as shit, but he's American. He's American.
Right.
And he has his dreams.
That's right.
And he has his hope. And then he goes against the super evil Russian guy, and he's evil because he's Russian.
Whoa. Which Rocky are we talking about?
Even the first one. Like
the first one's Apollo Creed.
No, sorry, the one where he fights the Russian.
Fourth one.
Yeah, the main one. Like, I consider that the main one because that's the one everybody,
knows.
But he goes against like the Russian, like the evil, and it becomes America versus communism.
Right,
and that's what it is, and it encompassed the feelings of the world at the time, just like in the 50s, all of your evil villains would have been German.
Yeah.
Right, and now, and then in the 80s, it was all Russians. And I mean, it could be the Russians still nowadays.
From my point of view, pure action-packed. Great montage training scenes. I mean, friggin' awesome fight scenes. I mean, the fight between Rocky and Drago is just smash mouth, pure smash mouth all the way. But myself personally, I gotta go back to the original Rocky. I love the original because I think that's where you started out and then veered into the fourth one. But it is the all or nothing movie. You have this guy who's kind of a bum. He gets his shot at the world heavyweight champion. I mean, that's everything. That's everything to somebody in that sport, in any sport. Pro wrestling, kickboxing, ultimate fighting, whatever you may be. And there's a scene in the movie, and it's kind of one of my favorite movie scenes. And after everything Rocky's done to get to this point, and the day before the fight, he goes to the arena, and the promoter comes up to him and says, like, Rocky, you should be at home resting. He says, he says, I can't sleep. And guy, he says to the guy, I should be wearing these colored trunks instead. The poster doesn't show that. The guy looks at him and says, you know what, Rocky, it doesn't matter. You're going to give him a great show. And that's it. The guy already doesn't believe in him. Right there, he takes him down, and Rocky goes home and he says to his wife, I can't win. He says, nobody's ever gone the distance with Apollo Creed. That's all I want to do. I want to be the first guy to go the distance with Apollo Creed. So right there, he's cut himself down from winning, but he still has given himself a goal. And the fight at the end is spectacular. Pure true your nails to the bone because it is completely back and forth. So it's like you can't really pick who's going to win, who's going to lose. But everything leading up to that is like, even though the action is kind of slow there, it is worth to sit through the film to see how it's going to come about. And not a lot of movies can pull that off, where I know I'm expected to see this action film, but where's the action? Oh, like, here it is. That was totally worth, and be able to still sit there and say, wow, that was worth absolutely every penny or every minute to have to sit through everything to lead up to this point. So like that's kind of a big thing I see, and that's what proved that Stallone had talent in Hollywood, that he could write, and he could create a fantastic story. And Rocky came out for winning Best Picture for 1976, and I think I think Best Director as well. The guy can write. At the time,
he can't speak, but he can write.
My big thing that I would like to focus on today is I'm not really sure how to word this. Action films that always follow the same formula, and I don't know why. I guess example to kind of say what I'm trying to get across here is take buddy cop movies. Oh, cops that are friends that fight drug dealers. Oh my God, how many times have we seen that?
Well, 4 just in the Lethal Weapon alone.
Exactly, 4 in like Lethal Weapon alone.
And there's always, there's always the good cop, and then the cop that's a little off the rails,
Yeah.
And half the time they are forced to be partnered up, even though they don't want to be.
But they wind up becoming friends. Lethal Weapon was a prime example of that. Both great characters from Danny Glover and Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson was just perfect as wild-eyed Martin Riggs. And again, this was another one that showed we knew that Gibson had the military background, that he was a sharpshooter, and that's pretty much all he knows. Mm-hmm. I know how to kill. I know how to kill people. That's what I'm good at. And it's awesome to see him paired with, this is my family man. This is my big house. Oh, we're having pot roast for dinner.
Yeah.
Roger Murtaugh, and a guy who's always played it by the rules, played by the book. And so to see the two of them break each other out of the shells that they're stuck in is a fantastic character concept. And I find that over time, that shit was just lost. Now, it was great to see it come back in the mid-90s with Bad Boys. The original Bad Boys, good movie. Good pairing with Will Smith and Martin Lawrence. They both had top TV shows at the time, so let's see what they can do together on the big screen. although the film does kind of reek of effort to make the two of them look like badasses, because we're just used to seeing them be comedians. Great movie. But again, we're still dealing with the same concept. Drugs. Buddy cop movie, drugs. 20 friggin' years later, 10 years later, whatever the hell it is, after
Drugs.
tons of other movies that are done like that. And then we get stuck with things like the second Bad Boys. You've got to be kidding me. 2003, 2004, whatever it is, buddy cop movie, drugs. And the only problem with this one is at the almost 2.5 hours it lasts for, with pointless comedy scenes thrown in there for no apparent reason, just to fill up time, because it has nothing to do with the story. I don't care. You could have cut this story back to about 1.5 hours, and this movie could have been over with.
At least,
And
at least with Lethal Weapon, the comedy part was good too.
the comedy part was there too.
But it was good.
Like Die Hard, they had done a great comedy action script, great characters, great character introductions. Busey was great as a bad guy. Spectacular martial arts sequence, fight sequence between Mel Gibson and Busey at the end of the film, which actually took them, I think, a few nights to film, actually. And I think Busey and Gibson actually learned, I think, about 7 different kinds of martial arts, and I think actually partook in the fight themselves. I don't think there were stunt guys for it, not to my knowledge. I think the two of them actually went all out to give a great realism to the film, to bring that full Lethal Weapon concept to the film, that both of these guys are what they say they were, which is awesome, which I love.
So, and Lethal Weapon, it was funny. It had its comedic moments. It was good. I mean, there was a scene in a car, I think, with Joe Pesci in Lethal Weapon 4. Was it Joe Pesci?
That depends. There's a few with Joe Pesci in a car. The second one focused on him a lot in a car, but the fourth one was Chris Rock and Gibson in the car, and then Pesci pulls up the side.
That's the one I was. Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. That one was hilarious
and absolutely fantastic.
And the thing is, with the comedy part of it, is always good. And then Hot Fuzz.
Hot Fuzz is freaking
kind of a buddy cop comedy movie, but of course it's from the same guys who did Shaun of the Dead. It's like a comedy version of something serious, and whereas Shaun of the Dead was sort of a comedy with zombies, which was great, this one was basically a comedy movie with cops.
Right.
But not like Police Academy or something like that. This was different, and it was good, and it was funny, and the reason I brought it up too is because in the grocery store scene where everybody's shooting at each other, and he dumps the guy in the freezer or whatever, and then after he's done, he looks at the guy and he's like, freeze. And then he was like, oh, that was so good. Like, why didn't I do that earlier? And it was just,
earlier,
it was like
right.
The one, like that whole, after you kill somebody, you got to have the line,
Right. And that focuses back to, I have to have the cheesy one-liner after I've done my guy in. Going back to the start of action films and where kind of action films originated from, there's always been action movies, whether we're looking at gangster movies back in the 30s.
I was going to say, even the Westerns. You would have to consider Westerns to be
great concept.
To be action movies, right?
And there were earlier things like that, obviously in the 50s, and Westerns were obviously big at the time, war movies in the 40s, and things like that. Action heroes, though, to my concept, I think really stuck out when Bond came in, because we've created a first action character that we want to do multiple movies with, multiple series with, and of course Bond also started the spy craze era, because that was the big thing of the 60s. We've not only created this action star, but we've created this super spy.
Well, and that was the beginning of the Cold War.
The Cold
I guess
War
the beginning of the Cold War, I guess, was the 50s, but
right.
It was all through, basically the 50s straight through the 80s was all the Cold War, but the late 60s, early 70s, a lot of Vietnam kind of took over that.
War movies kind of took over.
But that was the thing.
Like
That's when people really started to learn about spies. I'm sure there's been spies long before
spy
that.
movies,
but,
kinds of things like that.
but not just in movies, but in actual real life. People
Bond
started
created-
hearing about these spies with their gadgets, and they would infiltrate, the Russian, like the Soviet Union and spy,
Right.
and there were Russian spies in the U.S. So I think James Bond kind of was born out of that. But you're right, like for having a hero.
Exactly, and it's not
Like, that was
just
kind
any
of the
hero.
first.
It's a hero that anybody can watch. We've made everybody can go to the movies, grab a thing of popcorn, and watch a Bond movie. And things that Bond movies started to incorporate, like so when we go back to 1962 and the premiere of Dr. No, people didn't know what to expect, and it had great spy stuff. It had great action for the time that it was made. Oh, but then comes the key pinnacle scene. Smoking hot lady comes walking out of the water in a bikini, quite revealing for the time. And goes and gives her name, and her name, I can't, Honey Rider, which was humorous at the time. And as Bond films progressed, there had to be a Bond lady for every movie. And the Bond lady had to have the most obscure of name. The more of the double
galore?
entendre that is Pussy Galore. Goldfinger.
Well, here's the other beauty part, because Austin Powers totally
Right, a
played
lot
on
of
that one
vagina.
too. A lot of vagina.
It is absolutely fucking
Foxy,
hilarious.
what was it? Foxy
Foxy
Cleopatra.
Cleopatra.
But yeah, a lot of vagina was, I think, one of the best.
Felicity Shagwell.
Felicity Shagwell.
Like, they were friggin' hilarious. Now, going back to Pussy Galore and Goldfinger.
Like, I think Pussy Galore would be a risky name to do now.
Well,
Let
Pussy
alone
Galore,
back then, right?
Pussy
Like,
Galore at the time, Goldfinger almost did not make it over to the States for premiere and things like that because of the name. States didn't want it there. And at the time, they had considered it racy. But the fact that it was Bond and Bond movies were picking up was the only reason they let it come over. But if it hadn't, Goldfinger probably could have been the biggest flop in Bond history if it hadn't. As only the third one made in 1964. And it is the quintessential James Bond film. Connery looks his absolute best in the film. Fantastic story, fantastic villain and co-villain at the same time, and super spy car. We pull out a great European British Aston Martin DB5, ejector seat, smoke screen, oil slick, machine guns,
Now,
classy looking car.
do you think, now aside from the action, do you think the reason James Bond did so well is just simply he's what every man wanted to be?
Absolutely.
Smooth talking. Basically came out the winner in every situation he was in.
But this is...
Got the ladies, drove the best car. You know what I mean?
Pretty good. The guy's a government
just-
agent. The guy's a government assassin.
But like, I mean, I guess the word that they would have for it now is his swagger, right? Like, he
Right.
was just,
He got the ladies.
he was the fucking man.
Now you
You know what I mean?
You've hit a huge nail here. And forgive me for this if this turns out to be a rant. Bond movies are products of their time. Anybody out there that's a Bond fan knows this. If we start at the 60s, that was the spy time and era. When we moved into the 70s, and especially the start of Roger Moore and Live and Let Die, which at the time was considered to be a black exploitation film. I think Bond and the Bond girl are the only white people in the film. And at the time, it was considered to be a black exploitation film. But of course, they stuck with the Bond name because that's what it was. They didn't turn it into anything like that. So again, a product of its time for the early 70s because the black movement was coming in at that time. And of course, it dealt with drugs and so forth, which was another big movement that was coming in at the time
Yeah.
because of what was going on. And Roger Moore definitely fell into two times that were definitely products of their time because the Cold War really started coming up at that due point in time, and Russians were now starting to become more the villains as Roger Timothy Dalton in the late 80s, attitude was kind of starting to become more things. So we saw Bond kind of take a turn. And Timothy Dalton brought more attitude as James Bond and more swagger and suave. So like he'd be the kind of guy that would be like, oh, well, he can accept my letter of resignation. If he fires me, he fires me. I'll thank him for it. And that's something Bond never would have said. And we're kind of changing the Bond character. And unfortunately, at the time, Timothy Dalton started bringing down numbers in the box office for the Bond franchise, which was sitting at the key pinnacle peak by this due point in time. And there was a long hiatus. And coming to the mid-90s, Pierce Brosnan. Hello. Because he completely revolutionized James Bond. So if we take a look at GoldenEye, it's like Die Hard, James Bond style. Pure action up the ass. Friggin' awesome.
I mean, and GoldenEye is definitely my top Bond film. And not just because I
hardcore
logged 2,000 hours in GoldenEye for Nintendo 64 when I was younger either.
So did everybody else.
But I mean, it was such a good action movie.
Okay, so now you saying that, generations that grew up not liking Bond, GoldenEye was a big turn because now we've brought in something that, oh wow, the newer generation, look at the action in this. This is hardcore. This is badass shit. And Brosnan carried that out for his stint as Bond, and then entered Daniel Craig. This was what James Bond is supposed to be. And this was the point for my rant. When I said Bond was a product of their time, in the 60s, 70s, maybe even 80s, you couldn't really show Bond the way he was supposed to be because it was too hard-edged for the time. Daniel Craig and Casino Royale / Quantum of Solace showed what Bond really was. He was rough around the edges. He was full of himself. He killed before he thought. A lot of the times made a lot of mistakes. And that's what Bond really is. Apart from being smooth as well when the time comes, yes. But definitely just a stone that we're still chiseling away the rough edges at. And I mean, it was said when Casino Royale came out, it took 44 years to make James Bond the way James Bond was supposed to be. And to see Casino Royale as a prequel and to be able to take us in our mind, if we think about it, back to that, I'm watching the first Bond. And once I watch this, then I'll go watch Dr. No and From Russia with Love and Goldfinger and work my way up the series.
Just out of curiosity, rank your Bonds.
Rank my Bonds? Do you want me to go through all of them?
Like the guys who played Bond.
Guys who played Bond?
Because that incorporates the movies they were in as well.
Connery is my favorite. He is the one that brought the character to life. He was the one that we got used to of a vodka martini, shaken, not stirred. The name is Bond, James Bond. He was the first one to incorporate all of these. And the author of the books, actually, Ian Fleming, would visit the sets sometimes. And actually, when they were making Dr. No, he actually went to the producers and said, like, who's this guy sitting over here? And they said, well, that's who we've recruited to be James Bond. It's Sean Connery. I don't like him. He doesn't suit James Bond. He doesn't suit the Bond personification that I want.
Hmm.
And I say that to myself, and I can't picture anybody else's Bond back in that time. I can't picture somebody else being James Bond instead of Sean Connery. And the producers actually, when Dr. No ended, looked at one another and said, this movie sucks. Like, this bites. And who would have guessed that 55 years later, and we're still talking about making another James Bond after all of that. And 55 years later, it's the longest running movie franchise whether you like it or you don't like it, and people out there are entitled to their opinion. A Bond is an acquired taste. But you cannot deny what it has done for cinema and cinema history in just creating something as simple as that. And Bond never had really foul language, and there was no blood and guts all over the place. There didn't have to be gratuitous nudity, full frontal sex. We just created these great grab a bucket of popcorn movies and, like, you know, let's go watch some James Bond. Let's see some cool gadgets. Let's see some cool car chase scenes. And
it had a little bit of everything.
And it had absolutely everything. Next, I would have to take Daniel Craig. To basically, without going through everybody, Timothy Dalton definitely sits at my absolute lowest. Roger Moore would be next up from him. George Lazenby kind of sits in the middle.
And then Brosnan would kind of sit in the middle too.
Brosnan would kind of sit after Daniel Craig. He'd be third down. And the unfortunate part that Brosnan got was when he took over as James Bond, there was no more books. So they had to start creating stories. And that's why there was such a hiatus between License to Kill, which was 89, and then the 6-year hiatus before Bond jumped back on the screen in 95 with GoldenEye. We had to make up a story. And unfortunately, that's what Brosnan got. And it started falling kind of weak. And they all kind of started turning out the same. Brosnan kind of phased off out of there. He still stayed suave and he still stayed Pierce Brosnan, but not enough to keep the franchise at par.
So, James Bond, we talked about that, guns, gadgets, things like that. So let's take another directional turn here. Martial arts.
Love martial arts movies.
Bruce Lee,
Jet
Jackie
Li,
Chan, Jet Li, Uma Thurman,
Brandon Lee. Let's even start running things down here. Martial arts movies. Okay, you know what? Here comes the big bottom line between action movies and, as we said at the start, what makes them so interesting? What makes us listen to everything that we've complained about throughout this about action movies? What draws you to an action movie? Well, you know what draws me to an action movie? Depending on what it is, I may care about the story. I don't give a shit about the story, though. I'm here to see people get fucked up. I'm here to see people get shot to shit. I want to see cool explosions. I want to see cars crashing up all over the place. And I want to see some ass kicking. Well, a martial arts movie is the same thing. Why do you people out there think all martial arts movies have the same kind of concept? You killed my master. You killed my boss. You killed my sister. You killed my dad. I'm back for revenge. All revenge movies. You know why? Because I don't give them fucking fuck.
The guy from the other dojo, bro, did the illegal leg sweep, and now I have to beat him.
Nobody cares about the story about a martial arts movie. I am just here to see guys get fucked up. Like, if we go back to the early 70s and Sonny Chiba movies and Street Fighter and Return of the Street Fighter, like, all Sonny Chiba played was this guy that wore a black outfit and he got paid large sums of money to go fuck guys up. That's it. There is no story to this. All we're doing is seeing this guy get paid large sums of money to go fuck guys up. And that's it. Because that's what a martial arts movie is. Now, where we saw a turn in that in martial arts movies, Enter the Dragon. The film that made Bruce Lee famous. His only Hollywood feature. He passed away at 32 years of age, 2 weeks to the film's opening premiere. And this was the first martial arts movie where there was a story and there was great characters. So kind of in a Mortal Kombat concept, we see these 3 different martial artists. We see a guy that's a degenerate gambler. We see this black guy that's on the run from the cops. And we see Bruce Lee, who's out to avenge his sister's death. And we get great backstory about each one of these characters, but we also get fantastic martial arts sequences and fight sequences. And still more story carrying on after we meet the main antagonist who's started an opium ring. It's not your typical martial arts movie. And for the early 70s, that's what really started drawing people into martial arts film. This is a fantastic story. And I get to see some great ass kicking here. And I get to see Bruce Lee in top form. And it's a Hollywood feature. This was his only not Hong Kong feature. And martial arts films also had kind of...
They had a mystique to them.
They had a mystique to them, and they kind of had like a sad... I don't know if upbringing is the word I want to use.
But there was always, like, the plot was revenge. Something had always happened.
Right.
And the guy was getting revenge.
Right, absolutely.
Or was thrown into a situation he didn't even want to be in. Like, and you know, I think he gets lost a lot too, because Jackie Chan was
fantastic martial artist.
Great martial artist, but he did a bunch of really stupid movies, and a bunch of them
The Drunken Master.
A bunch of them were Chris Tucker. But he did more of the comedy movies.
Right.
Like a lot of like Shanghai Nights, Shanghai Noon.
Yeah.
Like I would lump that in more with Beverly Hills Ninja starring Chris Farley. Like, you know what I mean? Like more comedy than anything else.
Yeah.
But that was, sorry, Sean was looking for things. He lost things, and he was looking around.
I'm still here.
Thought he was having a seizure for a second.
I'm still here.
But Jackie Chan went the more comedy route, whereas Bruce Lee stuck to
Bruce Lee was kind of the first to bring martial arts films out, and his big his first stint in Hollywood really was the Green Hornet and being Kato. And when coming to America, his big concept when he did was he wanted to introduce his culture to the Western civilization, because at the time it wasn't really understood. And that was all this guy wanted to do. And unfortunately at the time...
And that's what I meant with the mystique of it, right? It was a different culture. It was something that...
It was mesmerizing at the time.
Yeah, you don't see that here. Do you know what I mean? Like, you don't meet a lot of people. I think it was Lucy Liu says to Uma Thurman, "You won't last 5 minutes." And Uma Thurman says, like, "I only need 4.5 minutes," or something. Right. I only need 4.5 or something like that. And if you time that fight scene, it lasts exactly as long.
Exact same length of time.
As she says, yeah.
I loved Kill Bill because it was such a different outlook on martial arts movies. And it paid homage to old school Hong Kong martial arts films. Which again, where Bruce Lee got his start out. After the Green Hornet had failed, his pops had passed away, and he went back to Hong Kong, and producers caught concept of him there and wanted to make a movie with him. Because over in Hong Kong, like, the Green Hornet wasn't the Green Hornet, it was the Kato show. Because he was Asian. And so he created a hero for them, and they wanted to make a movie out of him. And it was just blind luck that he wound up getting picked up, and that's where his career took off. But again, only Hong Kong films. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until he started becoming big doing that Hollywood wanted him back. And here comes Enter the Dragon. Which, although Hollywood fucked him over, Hollywood made him what he was, what he became. Not that he wasn't already something ultra mega spectacular to begin with at the time. This guy created his own style of martial arts, for Pete's sakes. How many other people have...
That's pretty impressive.
How many people have done that? I mean...
All right, so another thing, just because we're getting a little long on time here. So, other type of action movies, say stemming off from when we were talking about The Transporter. Fast and the Furious.
Car chase movies.
Gone
in 60 Seconds.
I loved Gone in 60 Seconds. I was not overly impressed with the fact. The first Fast and the Furious I liked.
I think Gone in 60 Seconds.
The second one I was I think I might have seen pieces of the third one. Apparently, they've just done number 8.
Yeah, 8 or 9.
Like,
It's one or the other.
it's way too much. But
I'm so lost with it, it's not even funny.
but I think the first Fast and the Furious movie
It was a
really good.
fantastic idea.
Gone in 60 Seconds was.
I think Gone in 60 Seconds took a big punch in the box office because it's a remake. There's another Gone in 60 Seconds, and
True.
I think a lot of people compared it to that. And that's, again, where remakes hit as a problem because people go back and they're like, oh, well, it's just
But
a
see,
ripoff.
when I watched Gone in 60 Seconds, I didn't even know there was an original to it. I watched it. I thought it was really good. And another one that does have some car chase, actually a really cool car chase in it. One of my favorites is The Italian Job.
Italian Job, fantastic. Great crime movie,
Now,
car chase movie.
I knew there was an Italian Job because I knew Michael Caine was in it, but in the original.
Right.
But when I watched the newer one with Mark Wahlberg, that was the one. I loved that car chase with the minis.
Yeah, like older movies. If we go and watch them today, again, you have to be able to put yourself back in the mindset that I'm in 1975 or I'm in 1971 or something, and because that's the only way you're going to enjoy it. With everything that we've seen today, things like the 70s, 60s, that ain't going to be shit. Bullet doesn't mean diddly squat to me with Steve McQueen anymore. But when I watch it, if I go and put myself back in 1968 when that was made, yeah, man, like this is a car chase movie. Those were the days that made car chase movies. Those were the all or nothing days where fucking actual guys were in the cars and were crashing up real cars, Vantage Point, kinds of things like that. Those were all older car films as well. And these were the guys that put their asses on the line, smashed up real cars. So again, if you take a look at it, of putting yourself back in that time and watching it and thinking like, this is way more real than the shit that, we see today. Today we can CGI everything, or I can just edit some guy in there. I can edit all this.
That's why I wasn't a big fan of the new Jurassic Park movie, because I knew the dinosaurs were just CGI, but they used the real ones back in the 90s, right? Because they didn't.
One of my favorite things that took. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off from.
No, it's okay.
Jurassic
I made a joke and it didn't land. It's okay.
Move
on.
I'm sorry, but when you said we were getting pressed for time,
I'm not at my wittiest tonight. Just
one of my favorite action films is Doomsday.
great
For
movie.
people that haven't heard of Doomsday, what we're mixing is an epidemic film with this plague, but 200% action in your face. But what I love about the film, and again, sorry, spoiler alert, what I love the most about the film is we have this, it's set in the future, we have this futuristic concept. Scotland has become this quarantined off plague zone, just fucking disaster. And these team of soldiers are sent in to find a cure for this epidemic. And somewhere along the way, we cross under our tunnel and we're in medieval times. And I mean literally medieval times. Castles, knights in shining armor and horses. And because the premise when this happens is when they meet the bad guy, because he says, this is a land of purity. We have lived the old ways to not bring any plague, to not bring any disease, because people and society are the downfall of plague and disease and so forth. That's how this disease which you seek a cure for has been created, the human race and so forth. And he says, here we live a life of purity and so forth. So we get a fantastic changeover and find out why these two different lands exist, these two different living areas. And
it was a good movie.
Doomsday,
It's
fantastic.
definitely one to watch.
So last point I'll bring up, what's your favorite action movie?
Well-
favorite action movie of all time?
Oh God.
Like on any given day, somebody would say to you, "Hey, Mike, want to watch?" Absolutely. You know what? I already knew you were coming over. It's already in the DVD player.
For me, it changes quite.
Okay, so say average then.
Rate. Well, I mean, I always like a classic like Die Hard.
Absolutely.
Deadpool.
Deadpool, fantastic.
I mean, for its comedic elements and its sick sense of humor.
Sick sense of humor, very black sense of humor.
Like just the beginning scene where the vehicle's rolling and they're bringing up the opening credits and everything's kind of going in like slow motion, but sort of pictures. Like, you know what I mean? It's amazing.
Absolutely amazing.
But I think just for basic action and just because it sort of mocks the genre without actually mocking the genre, and this is something I wanted to save our last couple minutes for, The Expendables. Because The Expendables basically just took every action star and put them in one action movie.
Right. We blend new action stars of today with old action stars of the time. And
they had Stone Cold Steve Austin just for the hell of it.
Just for the hell of it. Terry Crews, just for the hell of it. Randy Couture, just for the hell of it, because we can. Why? Because these guys are packing muscle. And they're here to kick ass.
And I thought it was such a great movie. And there were a couple highlights to it for me. I mean, I thought it was very heavy on Stallone and Statham. And of course, me not being a huge Stallone fan, I was like, but it had all the stars in it. I mean, even if Arnold Schwarzenegger or Bruce Willis were barely in the first one.
Barely in there.
They were still in it. And I think it's the second Expendables.
Yes.
When Chuck Norris just kind of comes out of
nowhere.
Makes his brief cameo and leaves. Like, that to me, awesome. It was like, okay, it had Chuck Norris. Like, the only thing that the movie was missing to me was Samuel L. Jackson making an appearance.
Pretty much.
But
pretty much.
The fact that they had Chuck Norris, because that was the one guy I thought was truly missing from those, was him.
Only problem, film fans out there, know your action movies if you're going to watch The Expendables, because quotes are stolen from old action movies, or if we're poking fun at an action star, they steal quotes from old movies that they have been in,
and I think
to throw at their faces.
And I really think my favorite one is when Bruce Willis gets up to run, and he turns to Schwarzenegger. The way he turns to Schwarzenegger and he says, "Cover me, I'll be back." And Schwarzenegger just kind of looks at him and just, "Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker!"
Yeah,
you know, it just
that's freaking hilarious.
Because that was almost a fourth wall break, right?
Absolutely.
It was.
There's a few of them.
There was, there was a decent plot line to it as far as action movies go.
Absolutely.
But just the fact that it had every single action star,
action star.
It was like an all-star roster. It's like being a hockey fan and then going to watch the All-Star game.
It's ass kicking without even having to say it's ass kicking. You already know this is ass kicking.
And I think that's probably my favorite one.
And just also out there, people, going back to martial arts films, yeah. So anybody out there that's a Chuck Norris fan and thinks that Chuck Norris is the fucking shit and can do absolutely anything, I will point out, go back to 1973's Return of the Dragon, and you can watch Bruce Lee kick Chuck Norris's ass 6 ways from Sunday. So,
well, I think this is a good place to end.
Absolutely.
The podcast for this week.
Dissed Chuck Norris for the day.
We did not have a guest today. We had one lined up. They backed out last minute. Because of scheduling issues with...
We're sorry, guest speaker, if you listen to this.
Because of scheduling issues with Sean and I, it wouldn't have been feasible to just say, okay, we'll do it tomorrow, or okay, we'll do it the next day.
Yeah.
So for the next one, we're absolutely going to have a guest. We're not 100% sure what topic we're going to do, but we're thinking we might venture into the sci-fi world for the next one.
Sci-fi realm.
So I guess this is it. I'm going to leave you with one thing, though. And this is kind of part of your Chuck Norris rant thing, and I'm just going to throw this out there. The day after Chuck Norris was born, the Japanese officially signed their surrender to end World War II. Just saying. Anyway, thanks for listening. We hope we entertained you a little bit. Maybe gave you some ideas for some movies that you want to watch in the future. And
My last thing that I'll say, some notables for action movies out there, other ones that we did not get to today. If they haven't been seen or you haven't seen them for a long time, The Matrix, John Wick, definitely go out and check out John Wick.
Love John Wick.
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which is absolutely fantastic. If you're not a martial arts film fan, definitely check that one out. The Crow, always hard hitting. Absolutely fantastic movie as well. Those are just a couple more of my picks for some action movies. Go back and relive Predator 2, boys and girls.
Oh,
Get to the chopper.
Get to the chopper.